Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Monica Levenmark. I'm a building technician with the Resident Municipality of Whistler, the building department. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay, so thank you for joining this informational webinar on building permit applications. So why we're doing this? As we continue to see the volume of building permit applications increase and the amount of internal time spent per application also increases, we're hosting this webinar to offer insight on what can be done on the applicant side to ensure that we receive a complete application package, thereby expediting your wait times. Now, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are coming to you from the traditional territories of the Squamish Nation and the Lil'wat Nation. For participants joining this webinar on their computers, please submit any questions or comments that you might have through our Q&A function. Questions will be answered at the end of the panel's presentations. If you are participating in the webinar by phone, you will not be able to submit written questions via Zoom, so please email your questions to our building department. That's buildingdept@whistler.ca. This PowerPoint presentation will be posted at whistler.ca/buildingwebinar, and all of the questions asked by email or in the chat that we are able to answer and weren't already answered here will be posted on our frequently asked questions webpage after the webinar concludes. Okay, moving into our presentation, I would like to introduce Joe Mooney, the building department manager.
Thank you, Monica, and welcome participants. We have two expert panelists here today to present the webinar. We have Jay Klassen, who will speak to multifamily residences and commercial projects, and we have Ryan Johnson, who will speak to single-family homes, renovations, demolitions, and revisions. Jay, I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Joe, for the introduction. Today I'm going to talk about the basics of the permit application process. All permit processes are essentially the same. You know, it all starts with the owner's wants and desires for their property. Then it goes into, the design process of the application, and then finally the verification process, which is done by the building department. So I've laid out here a basic problem-solving approach for the design process. First off, you start with identifying what are the regulations that apply to my property. Then you examine the potential solutions for complying with those regulations, and then you need to demonstrate. So, using your skill set, prepare drawings, prepare documentation to show that what you're proposing to do meets all the regulations. So I'm going to start with going through all the identifying all the regulations. The main ones are for all permits is all the land use regulations. So that regulates what you can and can't do on your property and what your property can be used for. The building code regulates how things can be constructed, as well as dealing with life safety. And then there's also other safety provincial regulations that come into play, Vancouver Coastal Health, WorkSafe BC, and also one item to keep in consideration with the building code is the Architects Act, which regulates when an architect is required. And then once you figure out what you can and can't do, you'll move on to the examination phase of examining solutions for your project. So what you need to do is sit down with the owners of the property and weigh out what their plans are for the property, as well as what the regulations are, and come up with a solution that meets the regulations and complies with what the owners want to achieve with their project. And then once you weigh out all that stuff, you'll need to clearly demonstrate in various forms how you're taking what the owner wants and informing the building department how you're complying with all the necessary regulations. It's useful to use drawings, scopes of work, and analysis. when dealing with land use stuff, it's always nice to clearly lay out what the requirements are and how you're meeting each individual requirements. If you're dealing with an existing property, it's really nice to lay out the drawings of showing how you're taking it from its existing condition to the final layout of the property. Essentially telling a story of how you're complying with the regulations. And then once you've clearly come up with a package that you think meets the compliance, you'll submit that for verification. So you'll submit your building permit application to the building department. The building department will therefore, review all the whole package for compliance to the regulations I noted in the identification stage. What the building department's role in all this is essentially just verifying that all the regulations have been met. We don't, take what the owner wants and come up with solutions. A lot of the permit applications that we receive in the building department are owners submitting, I want to do this, versus this is how I'm meeting the regulations. So if you want to get permits as quickly as possible, you need to clearly articulate how you're meeting all the necessary requirements. And yeah, that'll really shorten your permit application process. So I'm going to pass it off to Ryan, and he's going to talk about single family permit applications.
Okay, thanks, Jay. My application is somewhat more of a nuts and bolts application, just about how to prepare a complete permit application for single family or duplex, whether you're looking at a new single family dwelling or a renovation, and some tips and tricks to help you get to the end goal, which is to get your building permit and get work started. So before you apply, most important, planning everything before you actually apply is going to make everything go faster. As Jay mentioned, the common, most common applicable regulations are the zoning bylaw and the BC building code, and then all of our document and submission requirements, signatures, approvals from the owner, for example. Very important additional application considerations. We have a new official community plan in place, which requires more development permits than were required previously. We are now referring all new applications, so we will let new applicants know within a couple of weeks, ideally, if they are required to attain a building permit before we are able to issue a development permit before we are able to issue a building permit. Another item that is a little bit unique to Whistler is restrictive covenants. Every single permit application, the applicant needs to review all of the restrictive covenants that are on title for the property. These can be attained at the land title office, and on the title itself, there'll be a list of covenants. Every one of those should be read because there are often regulations that can restrict development on a property. So next, I'm just going to go through the application checklist quickly. Essentially here, this is probably your best tool to use to compile a complete permit application. And you literally just go through every single item on this list and check off and submit all of the items that apply. So if you're just doing a deck, well, only some of these application requirements will apply. So you do need to analyze that. Some of the common, I've just highlighted some of the common items that are missed. And some of the common items that are not submitted with building permit applications are a hazardous materials report form. There's 3 ports to that. So if a building is constructed prior to 1990, you're required to submit a hazardous materials testing report, as well as a hazardous materials report form. And if any hazardous hazardous materials are found, or if the work is worth more than $100,000, you need to submit a work-safe notice of project. Next, the declared value of construction. This is the total estimated cost of work for everything that you plan to do. Often we don't have this section filled in. It is an estimate, and it doesn't need to be right down to the cent, but we do need to know what the total cost of work is for us to do our work on processing your permit. Often the home warranty insurance is not submitted. We need that for any new Part 9 building, so any new single family or duplex building. A written scope of work, so as Jay alluded to, we're not, so the owner and applicant builder are intimately familiar with these properties. We'd like people just to remember that we are not. We haven't been to the property. We're not intimately familiar with what's existing and what you're proposing. So we want a clear written scope of work, so someone can just pick it up and read a few sentences and understand what the scope of work is. It's very important, as well as illustrating that scope of work. So as Jay said, particularly with renovations, we need to see what's existing, and then we need to see what's proposed. And then it's really clear, it's really easiest for us to do our work. Often a hydraulic load calculation is not submitted. This will delay the permit because we can't do our work until we get this calculation. It's a relatively simple spreadsheet that the municipality provides at the link there. And it's literally counting up the fixtures. How many toilets, how many hose bibs, how many dishwashers do you have? Printing that off and submitting it. That allows us to do the plumbing permit review. Sometimes we do not get a geotechnical schedule. So if any new footings, so if any new concrete footings are required, even one footing for a deck, for example, we do need a geotechnical letter of assurance submitted. So these are some of the common items that we find are missing, and we want you to have a complete application. So again, a complete application. You can move to the next slide, Monica. Thank you. That's on our end. That is the most important thing. I'll just give you an example. I mean, these are projects that can range into the millions of dollars. It's really in the owner's best interest to be well prepared with their building permit application, because a deficient permit application can result in really long delays in permit issuance. And I'm going to give you an example. I mean, time is money, right? And on a work site, if you've started or you want to start work and you have contractors ready and you have to wait 3 months, that's really challenging. It's challenging for us and it's challenging for everybody. So the best example I have is just for applicants and owners to understand what our process is like here at the building department is if just one document is missing, that can lead up to a month delay on the permit issuance. One document or one signature missing can lead up to a month delay. And some people might think, well, why is that so long? Well, here's why. Someone might wait, currently 8 weeks. They'll submit their application, they'll wait maybe 8 weeks to get the permit application reviewed, depending on how busy we are. And then after 8 weeks, a plans examiner will determine that, say, one document is missing. So it might take the applicant a couple of weeks to get that signature, to get that document arranged from the engineer, whatever's required, to resubmit it. So there's 2 weeks right there. Then it'll go into the plans examiner's inbox. So we cannot get to it the minute it comes in, because we're dealing with everything in priority order to be fair to everyone. So it can take a couple of weeks for us to get to that document. So you can see how just even one missing document can lead to a whole month delay. And so that leads to our process change here. We're gonna serve the public better by rejecting incomplete permit applications as of March 1st. So what we're going to be doing is reviewing them. If they're not complete or substantially incomplete applications, are actually going to be returned to the applicant. The applicant's going to have to come back and pick it up and complete that application and resubmit it. And what that's going to do is it's going to make everything move through our system much faster. It's going to help us on our end. There's going to be a lot less back and forth, and it's going to help all the applicants because someone who submits a perfect permit application is also detrimented by the other people who submit incomplete permit applications, because our whole project, our whole permit stream, our whole workload becomes a lot longer. So we want everyone as much as possible to have complete permit applications. We believe that is going to help speed up the permitting process significantly.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Ryan. Now, any questions that would be relevant to Ryan's topics or Jay's topics, please do submit them now using the Q&A function. Again, it's at the top of your screen or at the bottom. For me, it's at the top. It's probably at the bottom for you there. Feel free to submit those now. We will move into the question and answer section of our webinar. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming through. I see the first one here. Ryan, if I could ask you to answer this first question, please. How do I find out the status of my application in the queue?
Great. Yes, we've just updated our website. So on our website at whistler.ca/building permits, we now have a running tally of how long particular building permits are taking. For example, we are now at 8 to 10 weeks. So before you apply, you can start doing your planning by getting a approximate idea of how long. And really important to remember that our queue time is from application date to plan review. It doesn't mean that's you're getting your permit in 8 weeks. It just means that's when we're opening it and doing our review. We will typically issue then a deficiency letter, and all those items need to be resolved before we can issue the permit.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Next question here. Jay, if I could give this one to you. Does the building department accept digitally signed documents?
Thanks, Monica. Currently, we only accept a select few documents at this time. A few building permit application documents, such as the owner's authorization of agent, acknowledgement of owner and owner's agent, and the strata authorization for building permit application forms. And then when the building permit is ready for issuance, we accept signed permit documents at this time. That being said, in the future, we are currently working on accepting digital drawings and digital sealed Schedule Bs and Schedule CVs from engineers. So that is in the process, but at this time we don't accept them.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, next question. Ryan, you spoke to restrictive covenants. Can you please give some examples of restrictive covenants?
Sure, great question that came from Sarah. The question is, can you give some examples of restrictive covenants? So some examples of restrictive covenants that are in place in Whistler are easements, tree preservation areas, building envelope. In some neighborhoods, the height of your floor levels is restricted. There can be sprinkler systems required in some neighborhoods for single family dwellings. There can be building schemes. There are also land use contracts in place that can restrict development.
And we'll give the next question to you as well, Ryan. The question is, sometimes clients do not want to do a hazmat that is looking at hazardous material report while they're still living in their residence. The specific concern is that if there is an asbestos in the wall, they don't want the hazmat consultant drilling into it while they are living in the residence. Is there any provision to postpone the hazmat requirement until they are prepared to begin the work?
This is a great question because in fact you cannot do a fully complete, by the hazardous materials regulations, you cannot do a full hazardous materials testing with someone living in the residence because you're disturbing the material, and that is can affect life safety. So in that case, for example, with a significant reno or a complete teardown where people are living in the residence, what we'd like to see is a partial hazardous materials testing report. So many of the samples can be taken with people living there, but then and submitting that along with your permit application. And then when we're getting close to building permit issuance, what you want to do is then you will need to vacate the residence, get the rest of the testing completed, and then submit the completed testing.
Great, thank you, Ryan. This next question, we'll forward this to Jay. What additional assistance will the Resort Municipality of Whistler Building Department offer to help applicants ensure that the permits are complete prior to submission?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if I have an answer for this at the moment. You know, part of the reason why we're having this webinar is, you know, we're a bit overloaded at the moment and we're a bit short-staffed. You know, Joe might want to tackle this question in regards to, you know, potentially offering some service of walking people through the permit process. Joe, you want to jump in on this?
Sure. Thanks, Jay. One of the problems we have is COVID. You know, in the past, people could come into our office and spend a bit of time at the front counter with our building techs and our plan checkers. With COVID, we've kind of gone away from that. Although, if you do want, you can request an appointment with one of our plan checkers. We kind of discourage that because we don't want to have people coming into the office. What we have put in place, so we are now fielding all questions that come into the building department through one person, and that's Monica. So if you do have a question and you send it to, or you phone in, and you will get an answer back sooner than later. So if you can make the phone call to the building department, I think it's 935 what is it, 8150. That phone call will be worked through the process so we get back to you as quick as we can. Thank you.
If I may chime in as well, we would really like, the additional assistance is you are welcome to call the building department or email us. We really do want applicants to have done their research before and have specific questions. We can really help you a lot more if you've done your research, if you have a very specific set of questions, and you can provide us all the information that we need. So for example, the project address, what's proposed, that will really help us answer your questions.
Great. We've got one more question here. Jay, maybe you'd like to have a shot at this question. This is regarding building permits for temporary tenting over 10 meters squared, in particular, the timing required to process these permits.
Yeah, so these temporary tents, it's a common question we get in town. Unfortunately, anything over 10 square meters, and whether it's temporary or not, it still requires a standard building permit. So you'd go through the same process as any other permanent structure. So an example of that, the Fairmont Chateau puts up a tent every summer, and it goes through a full building permit process. So full engineering, you know, code analysis, and, you know, doing alarm tests on it and stuff like that. So yeah, it's no different than a permanent structure.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, so that was our last question. And with that last question, we'll be wrapping up our webinar. So I would like to thank our panel. I'd like to thank Joe, our building department manager, and our panel, Ryan Johnson and Jay Klassen, for their perspectives on building permit applications. And as a department, we'd like to thank you very much for your time and for your interest. This webinar will be up on our website. We will be posting this recorded version as well as answers to the questions on our Q&A, frequently asked questions website page. Thank you all.